This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point.
Hello, and welcome back to Money Made Simple, brought to you by Simplicity. Hi, Liv.
Kia ora, Jenny.
Today, we're talking about something that seems to be on everyone's mind at the moment, the cost of living.
Yes, it's being talked about as a crisis, right? But is it really a crisis?
Well, it definitely feels like it. We do want to talk a bit today about what that looks like and maybe some of the drivers behind it. But mostly we want to focus on practical tips and strategies that actually help people.
Not just talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And when we started talking about doing this podcast, we realised that there was so much that we actually wanted to cover in terms of these practical tips. And you know we like to keep these short and sweet. So we've decided it's actually just too much for one episode. So it's going to be another two-parter.
Oh, I love a two-parter.
Yeah. In part one, we'll look at what we mean by cost of living crisis and kind of some stats around it, and then focus on some practical tips for cost cutting.
Cool. Yeah. And then in part two, we'll look at sort of the other side of the coin in terms of ways that you might be able to increase your income. And also we're going to go through places that you can find additional support and resources.
Cool. So when we talk about the cost of living crisis, what exactly is it and why has it happened?
Well, there are a few key factors. First and most obvious is COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
Governments all around the world spent huge sums of money basically to prevent recessions.
Which we're in now, right?
Yeah, but we were all at home, generally not doing much, but we were spending a lot on household goods.
Right.
And this kind of collided with all the issues with the supply chain, transportation issues, and this caused prices to spike.
Yes, shipping prices were a big part of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course early 2022 brought us the conflict in Ukraine, leading to a global increase in prices for energy, fertilizers, food, and at the same time widespread labour shortages forced employers to raise wages, which businesses obviously passed on to consumers through higher prices.
Yeah, of course. And all these factors combined led to high inflation in lots of parts of the world, not just New Zealand. And inflation is basically the measure of how much costs have risen year on year. If inflation is 6%, then that means that the same goods cost 6% more this year than they did last year. So even though wages increased for a bit after COVID, they're now generally not keeping up with inflation. So prices are increasing, but our money doesn't go as far.
Anywhere in the world, right? This is a global problem.
Yeah.
But what does all this mean for us in New Zealand?
Well, inflation is definitely still an issue here, and an additional driver for us is the high housing costs. And to try and control inflation, our Reserve Bank raised interest rates, which then has put a further squeeze on household incomes in terms of the cost of mortgages and other consumer debt.
Yeah, which has also gone up, right?
Yes.
So the cost of essentials like energy, food, rent, fuel have risen, and the cost of managing debt like mortgages and other loans has also gone up. But the one thing that hasn't kept up is wages.
Exactly.
Yeah, so looking at the latest household expenditure data in New Zealand, the average amount spent by households was just under $1,600 a week in June 2023. And that was up 18.5% compared to 4 years earlier.
Okay, so that shows that basically all costs have gone up over those 4 years. Interestingly, I was looking at the same data, and despite the pressures on people, savings has actually increased, which is amazing.
Right?
And also charitable giving was up.
And
not by much.
Also, not weird in a bad way, like just interesting that wages didn't keep up, spending on goods was up, but somehow people found the money to
still be generous to others.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
So have you noticed the cost of living crisis?
Yes, in our own life, definitely. Everything around us seems to be going up in price. So just in the last couple of weeks, the after school care prices, so our kids go to after school care program, they've increased. Our insurance premiums have
across the board.
Yep, and a portion of our mortgage is just about to roll over onto a much
you're still
higher rate.
You're still waiting for that.
And at the same time, and this is a good thing, but after 5 years of self-imposed austerity and 20 years of financial mismanagement, we're saving for a trip overseas for my brother's wedding later this year. And I know that makes us really lucky, but it's a bit stressful as well, working out how to do this.
So the prices you feel like have gone up?
They've gone up heaps.
Since 5 years ago.
Yeah, and I know on this podcast we're constantly talking about saving up for what you want to do rather than getting into debt, but this might be a case of doing a bit of both. I think we will save for some,
Jenny.
and we may pay
We're going to have
it
to have
off
chats
for some.
offline about this. Talk about this later.
Okay. What about you? What's going on for you guys?
Absolutely have very, very much noticed the squeeze. So we have an investment property and our mortgage costs have all rolled over in, I think, both October and May, and they went up 2K a month each time. And so that's just an interest only because we basically owe more to the bank now than the houses are worth, which is not kind of, it's really scary. Our disposable income has disappeared, basically. So we have a boarder that pays rent, and it's unfortunate. At 38, we still have to have a flatmate. And yeah, same as you, insurances have just gone up ridiculously. Interestingly, I've got a Toyota Aqua, which I'm sure lots of you do because it seems to be a really common car. Also most commonly stolen car. So my insurance is about to go up at the end of July by 40-something%.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So it's gone from paying 80 a month to 130, which is just insane. And then I tried to shop around, as you do, cost cutting, which we'll get onto in a second. And a couple of insurers won't even insure them.
Why? What's the deal? Are they really cool cars?
Super cool. Have you seen my car, Jenny? Apparently they're too risky. So
right.
Anyway, that's shit.
So yeah, same for you guys. Costs going up in lots of different
disposable
areas.
Income
of your
going
life.
down, costs going up. So anyway, let's move on to some practical tips for cost cutting instead of talking about
our own problems.
Exactly.
Okay. So even before this podcast, I would look up, how can I reduce costs across the household? I've searched that quite a few times, and you tend to see the same old suggestions like grow your own vegetables, buy your supermarket shopping in bulk, take the bus.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of advice is really good in theory, but it doesn't always work.
No, I don't want to take the bus.
And I don't have room in my little kitchen to buy in bulk. There's just some practical limitations around these things. It's like lots of suggestions like getting solar panels on your house. You will save money in the long term, but you need to meet the upfront costs.
I didn't know about that. My husband is a super passionate gardener, and I don't think we save money at all by having quite a prolific veggie garden.
You don't?
No, the water costs and, I'm not even thinking about his time, but the costs of all the maintenance, I'm pretty sure it's the commercial growers have it down pat.
Yeah, so it's more a hobby.
Yeah,
rather
he
than
loves it. I would never take it away from him.
Yeah.
But I don't actually think we save money at all. But let's talk about some other suggestions that we've thought of for cutting household costs.
I think some of them are obvious, but let's revisit some of those obvious ones just briefly. So trite but true, the number one thing to do is have a budget, because knowing exactly how much you have coming in and going out is going to help you, one, feel more in control, and two, be able to identify where you might actually be able to make some changes.
Yeah, exactly.
So lots of little changes and cuts, they will add up.
Yes.
So having a budget, if you don't already have one, it's totally worth doing. So Sorted have a really good tool for setting up your budget.
Yeah, cool. Knowledge is power here, right?
Absolutely. Then there's the usual ideas around meal planning. If you know what you're cooking, you buy what you need and you use what you need, and you're not, one, wasting money, and two, wasting food.
Yeah. I think something that can kind of help with this is online grocery shopping. I know I'm pretty terrible at wandering down the aisles and having specials catch my eye, right?
I know. I literally will spend $50 more every single time I walk into a supermarket. I love online shopping because I know I've got my list. I buy what I need. I can easily search for the specials. It costs nothing to click and collect from my supermarket. And so it's really affordable and convenient. And you get to save some time. You don't have to
wander around the supermarket. Yeah, I agree. We got to pack and save. Actually, that's a good point. Pack and save is a whole lot cheaper than Countdown, in my opinion. So we get lazy sometimes and don't go to Pack and Save.
You go to the local supermarket.
Exactly, because it's further away. But oh my gosh, whenever we actually do the shop at Pack and Save, we realise how much cheaper things are there. And
if it's a bit further away, then go and do a fortnightly or monthly shop there, right? Go and get all your basics and you'll save money.
Yeah, agree.
So food is probably the biggest weekly household bill, but there are plenty of other bills that we're all paying. And shopping around to make sure you're getting the best deal is absolutely worth doing.
Absolutely.
It's also worth considering your own behaviour and habits at home, the way you consume some of these things. So electricity is
a big part of your household expenditure, right?
Yes. Money Hub wrote a guide back in May called How to Lower Your Power Bill, something like that, which is really useful. We'll pop it into the show notes. It talks about how to compare providers and plans, because it's not as simple, they say, as just one's cheaper than the other.
They're really structured differently, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it's got a few tips about how to work that out and how to work out how you use electricity and how to find the sort of best plan.
Yeah, like whether you're a low user plan or high user plan.
Or if you are working from home, so you're home all during the day, or if you are only, around at those sort of peak times. They point out that the easiest ways to save money is just using less electricity.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
Just
So
keep it simple.
turning down the heater and putting on a jumper instead. And taking shorter showers. I did not know until I was doing reading for this podcast that hot water is often the largest portion of your power bill.
Oh, I knew that.
And Genesis actually has this up on their website. So they had some tips about reducing your hot water bill. A 15-minute shower costs about $1, which doesn't sound like very much.
No.
But a family of 4 taking 15-minute showers every day will use about $120 worth of hot water.
That's a huge
a
part
month.
of your power
It
bill.
really is, just for a shower.
I knew it was the most expensive part versus, heaters and rooms and
Yeah.
stuff. But
So just reducing your shower time, which might not be doable for everybody, but give it
I don't see the point of spending longer than 5 minutes in the
Still
shower.
a lot of good thinking in there.
Yeah, my husband's the same. He just stands there and I'm like, stop wasting hot water.
But from 15 minutes to 5 minutes, you can cut your bill from $120 to $40 a month.
That's a lot.
Reasonable way,
If you're
month after month after month. So
absolutely.
yeah, taking shorter showers is a good one. Another thing is actually how you pay the bills, right? So you can automate your bills. A good way to do this is calculate your total yearly bills and then divide by the months or the number of pay cycles, and then set up an automatic payment for this amount, plus maybe an extra $10 buffer.
Just in case. Account for inflation, right?
Yeah, to transfer from your main account to a separate bills account and do that on payday. If you do that, then all your bills can be direct debited from that account. This way you're going to avoid any late fees and you know that you'll always have enough set aside. And it kind of evens out the cost over the year as well, so you don't have peak times.
Yes, and you kind of start maybe at the start of the year when it's not winter
Yes,
and the cost
start
are
in the
less,
summer,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, so this would be more if you were struggling to pay the bills, right?
Yeah, well, if you're like me and the bills is just another thing on your to-do list that you don't always get around to doing in a timely fashion, this just might be a way of doing it.
Yeah, the reason I said that is because I'm sure that all of ours are automated.
Of course they are. Because you are a super organised human being.
Superhuman being.
Yeah, you really are.
Okay, moving on.
Okay.
So I guess another thing is to be real about your non-essential expenses. So working out what's essential and what is not. And from the non-essential list, what could go? Like what could you cut temporarily perhaps? And I know this is a hard one because despite things being a bit tough, or maybe because they are, you actually still need some treats in life, right?
Yeah, you do.
So work out what non-essentials you can cut just for a little while. Doesn't mean it has to be forever. And then also budget for what treats that can fit within your budget.
Yeah, so don't completely remove all the joy from your life, right?
Yeah.
You can find ways to reduce expenses but not have a miserable life.
No, we don't want a miserable life.
No.
I do think, though, that in this case and at times like these, you do have to be prepared to make some sacrifices because otherwise you could just get into a spiraling debt situation if you actually can't afford to pay for all the things that you like and want.
Yeah, and then you're borrowing to do that.
Yeah, you might use your credit card too much and then perhaps you wouldn't be able to pay it back in full every month, which is what we always recommend.
Absolutely.
But I think in the same way, there's lots of ways you can think creatively about how to cut costs without having a completely miserable life. A bit like during the lockdowns when we just kind of had to make the most of the situation, right?
Yeah, when you have to, you can think a little bit outside the box and do things a different way.
So, I mean, let's think of a couple of things that you could do that could still make your life fun and enjoyable, but maybe, those cost-cutting ways.
Well, I guess for us, entertaining at home is a big one.
That's a huge one.
Rather than going out for drink or out for dinner, having gatherings at home.
Yeah, buying alcohol from a supermarket versus buying a $12 beer out is going to add up.
Still make that fun, right? You could have a cocktail night and everyone dresses up. You can organise games nights, have another family over and organise some games. The other thing is the free activities, and this is especially, I think, with people with kids when they're trying to entertain their children in the weekends. All over the country, there are amazing communities that run events and gigs and, outdoor movie nights.
There, right? Yeah.
Our parks, there's so much green space in New Zealand. The libraries, despite the cuts that were being proposed, are still amazing places to go. There's fun to be had without spending a penny.
Yep.
Another one would be DIY projects. There are lots of things that you can do at home yourself rather than calling in a more expensive professional. Again, doing some research for this, I came across a cool group called the Repair Cafe. There's 75 of them around the country.
That's actually sizey, right?
Yeah, and they've got a Facebook page and a website, so you can find out where they are. And the whole thing is that, things are made kind of to break and be replaced
Especially
now.
if they've came out.
Yeah, and we're losing the art of looking after things and fixing them. So you can take along your small repairs or home projects, and there's people there that know how to do things and they'll teach you how to.
Yeah, cool.
So I'm
So
actually
you don't
thinking,
have to just rely on yourself to work out. I mean, YouTube's a great friend, right?
Oh, it totally is, but it's also a social thing to do, right? You might meet some cool people in your community by going there.
Love it. Cool. Finally, another one that I think is a good idea because a lot of people waste so much money on is working out from home. And I mean, YouTube again is a behemoth. There's so many free workouts,
Yoga sessions.
Yeah, exactly. Pilates classes, all sorts. And other free online resources, apps. So you don't actually have to keep paying for your gym membership if it's one of those expenses that you could kind of, maybe just for the year if you're struggling,
if you
right?
love the gym, I know you do.
I do.
And it might be something that you don't do for 6 months or a year and you come back to it. So I asked the team, the Simplicity team, if they had any ideas as well, because you never know
What might come up?
up. And we got a few in. So Ian mentioned that he's stopped using PayWave, which
It's a weird one, eh?
Yeah, it might sound like a silly little thing, but I think it can really add up. The laziness of just being able to tap your card rather than swipe it or put the chip in is probably 10 seconds or something.
Yeah. And I think it's like something 1% to 2% or maybe.
Every single transaction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think it differs slightly on this, depending on the supplier.
Yeah.
But if you do that over the week, the month, the year, you might save yourself a little bit of
bits
money.
add up.
They really do.
We have another staff member, Bex, who has basically made a whole rule for herself, right? That she won't buy any new clothes for a whole year. Or is it longer? I think it might have been a year
And
already.
I have to say, her wardrobe is looking better than ever.
Yes, definitely. So that's a good one. We also had some thoughts from Craig, who's in our investment team.
Yeah, he came up with another tip, which I'd never really thought about. But someone in their family only uses the stovetop rather than the oven because it's a lot more electricity efficient.
Air fryer would come into that. I think that air fryer would be a lot more efficient in terms of
turning on a
its using heat.
whole oven just to,
So use that air fryer. Go back to that.
I don't have
viral
one.
trend, neither do we. But
Should we
those
buy
that
one?
don't, we'd buy a shared one.
A secondhand one.
Yes.
All right. Well, I reckon we've gone through a reasonable number of ideas. So we've talked about sort of what's going on and what that crisis looks like for people. And then we've discussed some practical ideas for reducing some of the costs in your life. This is not an exhaustive list.
Absolutely not.
There is some really awesome information online.
And we'll chuck as many as we can in the show notes, resources
For sure.
that people can use.
So in part 2, like I said, we'll look at how you might be able to increase the income coming in, the other side of your budget, and where you might be able to get some help and support from your community or at a government level.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, we look forward to discussing more next time and tune in again. Bye.
Bye.
This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website, simplicity.kiwi.